I read 9 books in the fall 2023 semester, which was unusual because I hadn't read a book since 2016. Here's the order that I read them in. The Housemaid and other Freida McFadden books were the best kind of books to get me out of a reading rut. With the exception of Boys Don't Knit, all the other books were thriller or a mystery. While I really did love reading Freida McFadden's books, I found I didn't vibe as much with the ones that weren't in the Housemaid series. I've heard people talking about Lucy Foley's books, especially The Paris Apartment, and some of the things are kind of negative, and I don't really know why. I think you should read any book on this list and form your own opinions without relying too heavily on my critique or anyone else's. I really enjoy Lucy Foley's books. I'm going to be on the lookout for The Hunting Party, and oh my goodness, I just found out that there's apparently going to be a screen adaptation of The Guest List, and I'm super excited for that. In terms of relationships, this is how the books rank. I'm mainly looking at romantic relationships, but I'm also taking into consideration family ties, sibling dynamics, and friendships. There's also a heavy emphasis on women supporting women, and none of that internalized misogyny nonsense, which is why The Housemaid is actually kind of low. I'll talk about it more later. It gets better towards the end, but before that, you're just reading pages upon pages of the protagonist just kind of bashing the other women in the book. Not the vibe. Here the books are ranked in terms of the best twist or twists in them. Some books will have to be left out, but I think this is the best time to put a spoiler warning because sometimes knowing that a book has a twist is a spoiler in itself. I'm not going into detail of why these twists were good, I'll save that for the spoiler section. Okay, now in terms of how well they ranked in terms of overall enjoyment. I'll give a brief review of these books. I'll try to lean away from too many spoilers, but there still might be some. The Coworker ranked the lowest. It really disappointed me. Every Freida McFadden book has its moments. They're interesting, can't deny that, but especially with the lowest ranking ones, they definitely became kind of formulaic to me. It just felt that nothing was shocking me in the way that it should have been. My beef with this book is that the twist is quite similar to the twist in The Housemaid's Secret, except that it was even more obvious. The relationships didn't make me giggle and kick my feet, and the drama just wasn't dramaing. I also found it weird that Dawn was clearly supposed to be autistic, but no one called it that, and none of her coworkers thought this was the case. It was strange that full-grown adults were getting mad at her or making fun of her over simply being clearly neurodivergent. Then again, with some of her actions, say McFadden didn't want to be accused of thinking that Dawn's behavior mimics how actual autistic people behave. I don't know. Every Freida McFadden book has its last-minute plot twist. This twist was that Natalie did steal the money. I don't think I cared enough about Natalie. Maybe that's why I didn't care for this book. I finished the book and I was like, well, moving on. The Inmate only ranks high because I was so invested in this one. I do this really annoying thing where when I'm reading a mystery or watching a movie, I'll come up with a theory or conclusion to predict the end of the film. And then often the actual ending I'm given doesn't live up to what I've created in my mind. Does anyone else do this? Am I just weird? The point is that around halfway, I had come up with the juicy ending to the book. And in my defense, fine, not everything can live up to my standards, but can't we try? The twist here is exactly what we'd known. The book starts with everyone thinking that Shane did the murders that happened 10 years ago. He tried to kill our main character, Brooke. They were dating at the time, but she didn't see him. Please remember that. Please remember the fact that she didn't see him. He's in jail and Brooke ended up having a kid with him. She goes to work at that jail and meets him, and he says he didn't do it. 10 years later, he's still trying to convince her that it was the other guy there, Tim. Meanwhile, outside the prison, Tim and Brooke are getting close. He's also getting a lot closer with her son, Josh. The point is that he swears Shane did the murders. Both men say the other did it. What made me mad was that Tim gets sent to prison, Shane is let out, and then it turns out it was him who did all those murders. Huh? Brooke is on some, oh yeah, I know what he felt like. That was definitely him on me that night. Even though I didn't see him, I know it was him. What is with this wishy-washy back and forth nonsense? I've left some stuff out, there was more to it, Shane had an accomplice, but still. The point is that I, as a reader, am expecting it to be either Shane or Tim who was the murderer. Subvert my expectations, please. You've got me in this place where you know I'm thinking of only 2 answers, so there should be a third answer I wasn't expecting but makes sense. Other than that, I wanted to find the relationship between Brooke and Tim cute, but she genuinely believed that he was capable of murdering women, so yeah, not the vibe. In the end, Shane tries to kidnap Josh, but icicles swallow him and he dies. The final twist is that Tim told Josh that someone called Shane Nelson isn't to be trusted, so Josh killed him. To be real, when I read that, I just kind of rolled my eyes and put the book away. The Locked Door had a lot of the stuff that annoyed me with the first 2 Freida McFadden books, but it ranked higher because while I didn't love the twist, it was unexpected and it made sense, so credit where credit is due. This book is similar to The Inmate with how it flips between a flashback and the present. In the flashback, the main character Nora is a child and seems to be somewhat of a sociopath. In the present, there's a serial copycat of her father trying to blame her for the murder. Firstly, reading this blurb, my first thought was, oh, Nora was the anonymous tip that got her father arrested. And yep, that's the case. If the reveal is so obvious that it could be guessed from the blurb, I don't know, maybe don't make it some big reveal. The other thing is that as a writer, specifically for a thriller or mystery, you need to imagine what your audience might be thinking. You need to use your words to get your audience to make certain assumptions that will help your twists hit harder. I don't think I was ever in the headspace Frida wanted me in. With the fact that her father is a serial killer and she was a weird child, I think I was supposed to believe that Nora could be the serial killer in present day, but I just didn't buy it for a second. So when it turned out that the flashbacks were just purposefully misleading us before revealing that Nora called the police, all I could do was shrug. I been knew. However, there was a moment, I'll give it to Frida, when Nora started thinking that the killer was Philip, her work partner. I was streets ahead of her. From the moment he took her cup because he didn't want her drinking coffee, then that mug was found in the victim's house, I was like, we got you. So when I turned the page and he was half dead in a chair with his hands cut off, I was like, oh. It did get on my nerves with how wishy-washy Nora was with Brandon. Was that his name? I don't really care. Like, she kept going to his house, blowing up, and then leaving. Obviously, having a serial killer for a dad could mess a child up. But dang, she had to chill. Also, I don't mind a misdirection, but I really hate it when I'm misled for the sake of being misled. Like, if a character says that Brandon brought a young girl to his house and she heard screaming, I might think, oh, maybe he's the killer. Then it turns out that it was just Brandon's daughter watching a scary movie and the character was just confused. That's fine. The whole thing with Brandon's landlady just being senile made my eyes roll because truly what was that all about? The person who was actually the murderer didn't have my eyes widening with shock, but as I said, it was a decent twist. The final last minute twist was that Nora gave a woman who was being abused by her husband a serum thing that could induce a heart attack. I don't know what Mifida wanted me to feel about that, but like, okay. I'm not saying I would kill an abuser, but don't expect me to feel bad. That wouldn't make me think that Nora is therefore a horrible psychopath. Boys Don't Knit is a real outlier in the books I read. I couldn't find another thriller, so I took myself to the juvenile section. I'll start positive. I liked the main character. I meant it to myself. Though reading about how quickly Ben was knitting, I found myself feeling bad that I'd been working on the same piece of work for months. This is perhaps the funniest book I read. I remember I was at a bookstore with my friend a few days before I started reading this, and I told her that I don't buy it when people laugh out loud at books, like it can't be that funny. But this book had me cackling. I'd be working at the front desk in the library in stitches. To be real, when I read the joke again, it didn't seem that funny, yet I was in tears when I first read it. It was quite charming, I knew what it needed to be. This is also the only book on the list written by a man, so in my personal opinion, I think the romance could have been left out of this. Firstly, Ben having a crush on his teacher is whatever, but her flirting back had me frowning. I genuinely kept looking back at the year of publication because, you know, back in the day, people were doing too much with inappropriate relationships. Pretty Little Liars. Gossip Girl. Luckily, nothing happened, but there were other moments that all I could think was, this was really written by a man. It was weird that some older girl in college kissed him. It was also weird how so many women just seemed to be attracted to him, and my mental image of Ben wasn't ugly, but at the same time, let's be realistic. I appreciated that Ben didn't partake in that much objectifying of women, but it was still irritating that he sat silently as his friends did so. But yeah, the main romance is with Megan. I was confused that she was the final girl considering when he first wrote about her. By the way, this book is a bunch of Ben's journal entries. When he first wrote about her, he mentioned how her mom is more attractive than she is. Like, excuse me? But they were cute enough when they were together and not just playing games with each other. Megan seems a lot like a woman written by a man who doesn't really get women. And by that I mean her character and motivations were written as cryptically as I imagine the author thinks women speak to him. I just think this was the weakest book in terms of romance, and yes, that includes the 2 books where the girl suspects the guy of murder. I think the friendship in the end was cute enough that we didn't need a romantic subplot. Speaking of relationships, Ben and his mom were cute, but that dad was doing too much. Imagine walking out on your family because your son knits. Like, please! Also, apparently that wasn't even the first time he'd walked out on them, according to Ben's journal. There was a point in his childhood that his dad had just walked out. Not the vibe. The Paris Apartment is a story saved by its ending. Someone on TikTok said this book was too slow for them and that nothing happened. I hear that, but I think it had enough drama to keep me going. There is a line in each Lucy Foley book I've read that has made me want to remove my eyes, wash them out, pop them back in, and hit my head hard enough to forget that line. That's not bad on her part. I think she wanted me to be uncomfortable. And that's the thing, at least. Her books had me feeling things. Anger, shock, disgust, a lot of disgust. While fine, not much happens, the knowledge that we learn had my jaw on the ground. I feel like reading Lucy Foley's books is like sitting in on a hot gossip session or a tea spilling session. When I found out what happened in Amsterdam, I was like, stop. Some might find the crime plot too simplistic, but I quite enjoyed it. I go on trying to understand a character's motivations, but the explanation involves stock markets or investments or something more complicated. While I wasn't the biggest fan of Jess, I enjoyed the parallels between her and the women victim to the crime Ben was looking into. As a detective or investigator, Jess was kind of useless. She figured out that the neighbors are a family and then kind of did nothing until the end of the book. In terms of romance, there was a pairing I was not expecting one bit. Ben really said everyone in the family. Just had a moment with this guy that I wanted to find cute, and I kind of did, but like it was so random, and no hate, but Ben had not been found. It felt a little inappropriate. The twist in this book had my eyes falling out of my head. I won't say what it is because I personally think this book is worth a read. So the ending was decent enough. I appreciate they didn't make Jess out to be a saint, but she wasn't horrible either. And I felt that it was ambiguous enough without leaving me with too many burning questions. The Housemaid's Secret is a sequel to The Housemaid, and some prefer to The Housemaid. I'm not one of those people. I was obviously more attached to Millie in this book, having known her from the previous one. McFadden was really smart about how she uses the fact that you most likely read the previous book to deceive you and mislead you even more here. When that twist hit, I won't lie, I was flabbergasted. But then that was it. The book had a lot of drama and action, but in terms of twists, not really. Like I said, the first twist was good, but then we spent like a couple of chapters explaining what got us to that point, and it felt a little predictable. Unlike The Housemaid, which I'll get to in a second, the midway twist is a little ambiguous, but then we get those chapters of exposition that, fair enough, somewhat predictable, had enough shocking moments that the predictability element wasn't that bad. But with this one, at the point that, okay, I'm not good with names, the furniture salesman, at the point that he's introduced, it was kind of obvious where the book was going. Also, things worked out way too well for Wendy in the end. How did she know Millie would have sold that jewelry or found a way to return it? How did she know Millie would have even kept the jewelry at her house? In the final act, the villain is killed, and the final twist is that Millie gave the killer her boyfriend's heart medication. I'm not that mad that the villain turns out to be a woman in this, not at all. I just think that with the first Housemaid book ending up being more of a women supporting women book than it had advertised, it did irk me a little that Wendy was the evil mastermind in the end. But that was a minor thing. In terms of romance, I started feeling bad for Millie's boyfriend, but the way he basically turned his back on her at the first sight of minor evidence of murder wasn't the vibe. I wanted Millie to just talk to him more, but then again, he did kind of dismiss her a lot more than he should have. But this book was saved because I figured out a twist that actually came true, and it was for the better. You see, there's this car following Millie. She can feel that someone is watching her. It turns out it's her ex, Enzo. Now, I realize how dodgy that sounds, but he really was just protecting her because she lives in a sketchy neighborhood. Not that I'm excusing stalking. Enzo was in the first book, and I fell in love with him there. Here, he's helpful, and he and Millie only broke up because he had to go back to Italy to take care of his mother. I cannot express to you how much I love Enzo, especially in the first book, which we will get to. Warrior Girl Unearthed is the only other book I read from the juvenile section. Let's get it out of the way. There is a mystery here, but it doesn't really have an overwhelming hold on the story. It's very central to the plot, yes, but I think the book did a lot more. Firstly, as someone who didn't know enough about Native American history or culture or beliefs, I still have a lot to learn, but this book was a pretty good introduction into this world that I don't know a lot about. I think what I had to say about the struggles of Native Americans faced in the past and the challenges that they still face today felt genuine and not too preachy. I also appreciate the arc that the main character, Pauline, goes through, because I kind of agreed with her when she stole that which was stolen from her people first. I enjoyed reading how she experienced firsthand what the ramifications of her actions were. The story did feel somewhat clunky at times, but I think I could attribute that to the fact that it's set over a much longer period of time than the other books, and its purpose is not only to tell a story, but to also show us things from Pauline's perspective, even if it's just a small conversation between her and her father. This made the characters feel a lot more human to me. The twist in the end is the revelation of who has been abducting all these indigenous women. At first, the twist felt a little cartoonish to me, but I think that's the point. I think it's in that with the way that their culture and ancestors have been treated, there's a good argument that Native Americans aren't seen as actual people, but more like collectibles or just objects to be looked at. What really surprised me about this book were the relationships. The romance was fine. I found it quite cute. I didn't love how Eric scolded Pauline when she first stole the moccasins. It felt very whiny and self-centered to me, but I appreciated how he apologized later on after getting a better understanding. But it was also the female friendships that made me really enjoy this book. There's a character in this who's 16 and a mother. As soon as she was introduced, I was expecting Pauline to expose her not like other girls vibe and poke fun at her intelligence and mock her. But that didn't happen. In fact, they were friends and supported each other. They're at a summer camp and their group would take breaks to allow the girl to pump milk. I don't know what media I've been consuming, but I've never seen so much respect for a teen mom before. And it wasn't like the book was saying it was a good thing that she got pregnant so young. I think it didn't let the fact that she was a mother stop her from being treated well or having a personality. Because this girl, Chauncey is her name I think, became one of my favorite characters in the entire book. The guest list is not ranked this high because of the twist. Like the Paris apartment, the guest list has different chapters with different perspectives. With who Foley chose not to give a perspective chapter to for the longest time, it was kind of obvious who would be the dead body in the end. I should have seen the twist coming. Everyone who was given their own chapters was given a reason to hate the murder victim except for one, the actual killer, who was pretty removed from everything else. Outside of that, let me tell you when I say I ate this book up. Outside of the mystery, the drama had me staying up late reading. That's not usual for me. I was turning those pages. Lucy Foley knows how to make me feel things, especially with Hannah. I don't know why, but she was the girly pup I latched onto. And whenever my girl was being disrespected, I just wanted to put myself into the story and throw some hands. When her and Olivia started bonding, I was eating it up. I really enjoyed this book. The twist at the end felt convoluted and a little too coincidental at first, but when I sat with it, I realized how many seeds had been sown for that twist to work. I could talk about this book ad nauseum, but let's instead move on to my number one, which, as you may have guessed, is The Housemaid. The Housemaid is what got me out of my reading rut. From the blurb, I was expecting that Nina, the lady of the house, would lock Millie up and Millie was going to expose some skills she'd been holding back and turn the tables on Nina. I was not expecting the twist that I got. And my word, did that make the whole thing better. Going into any story not expecting a twist but getting one anyway is always a simple pleasure of mine. Now, remember what I had said about knowing what headspace use readers in and knowing how to get them into a headspace that you need? Yeah, Miss McFadden understood the assignment for this one. When Millie was falling for Auntie Nina's husband, so was I. So was I. I was deceived just like Millie. Now, my red flag detector started going off a little earlier than Millie. First, them getting together even though he was still married was wrong, but I can't say I didn't want them together. Point is, he seemed just a little too eager to cheat on his wife. And I was like, okay. Well, she's kind of crazy. But then he exposed himself. The only person I liked more than him in this book was Enzo. And not only did Enzo not seem to like him, but he also didn't like Enzo. How do you not like Enzo and call yourself a green flag? When they had the interaction about the garbage, I was like, yeah, something ain't right with Andy. Anyway, if you haven't read this book, you should. Even knowing the twist, it's enjoyable. As I said, the one thing that got on my nerves was the way Millie talked about Nina in the narration. She made digs at her weight and the fact that she couldn't have children, and when Millie was crushing on Andy, she said how she could give him the child he wants. Didn't like that. She also made a dig at her roots showing, which, if you know, you know. And I think with how crazy Nina was acting, I let it slide, but it wasn't great. Although Nina did endanger Millie on purpose, which also wasn't right. I think their actions kind of balanced themselves out a little bit. And Final Moments did make me shake a little. With how Andy is killed in the end, something about that image made me shudder a bit. Nina choosing to take the fall was the vibe, and the detective letting it slide for his own reasons was also a vibe. If you watched my clickbait vs. the Stranger video, you'll know that I do like it when detectives either help cover up a murder or let the killer go. The final twist that Andy's mother is just as bad as he. I think it was creepy enough and not very annoying at all. Anyway, that's all I read. I don't know if I'll make a video like this again. I only read this much because I had a job at the library, but my next semesters are looking like they'll be a lot busier than this one, which is terrifying because this one almost killed me. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, and I'm open to suggestions. I think I've explained the kind of books I like. Tell me what you thought of the books I talked about. Are you going to read any of them? Let me know if you'd like me to give a more in-depth review of any of these books. Until next time, I'm Just a Squirrel, and thank you so much for watching.